So we haven't actually made a full-on formal video discussing JT Miller and the trade price, because it was reported on a few sources, a few guys on TSN, guys on Hockey Now, that talked about the Vancouver Canucks and this forward right here, and what exactly the Canucks could be asking in a trade-like scenario. Now, to be fair, we're going to go out there and establish this right here. Miller is not a guy that the Canucks are actively shopping, it appears. It just appears that instead the Canucks are listening to teams that are calling about this guy and maybe offering up some pretty significant assets instead, because when you take a look at who JT Miller is, he is quite literally the best forward on the team when it comes to point production. 44 points in 42 games played, over a point per game for the Vancouver Canucks, which is really great because last season he had 46 points in 53 games, so he is 2 points away from matching his last season total in about 9-ish fewer games if you do the math and multiply everything out. Miller this season has been phenomenal in terms of the point production. We saw the hat trick the other night. We saw the consistency this guy has when it comes to putting things up on the board. Now, sure, there are the odd moment or two where Miller goes out there and he does something you really would not prefer him to do. Like, for example, in the Calgary game, when he gives up on the play after getting slashed and hacked and he doesn't get the call that he wants, he skates slowly back to the bench so that no Canuck player can actually get onto the back check and stop Johnny Gaudreau from taking a slap shot. Now sure, Miller was so far behind, even if he did hustle, there probably would not have been a high chance that any trailing Canuck would have been able to catch up, but still, it's the work ethic, Bruce Boudreau said himself, that was unacceptable in overtime. You see this guy put his heart on his sleeve, and it's been one of the more defining qualities of his entire game the past few years he has been here in Vancouver. We saw this a lot last year too, especially when the Canucks went down with a whole bunch of guys testing positive. We saw the team play very poorly in the Canadian division, and you saw guys like JT Miller really start to showcase that desire to win and that temper. That was probably the coming out moment when I saw a lot of Canucks fans start to say, okay, maybe this Miller temperament is somewhat of a problem. But either way, we still love JT Miller. We still know the impact he has on this team, regardless of the personality and the desire to win and the somewhat negative traits that come along with that. But either way, let's go over JT Miller and what some of the NHL insiders have said it would take for this guy to be traded, what exactly the trade price is, because, hey, we spent 3 minutes talking about this guy, haven't discussed yet what a point-per-game, $5.25 million player at 28 years old who's got one more year after this season is worth in the market. Let's go over onto Pierre LeBrun on TSN Insider Trading, who kind of highlighted this the other day. If a team steps up with 3 to 4 prospects, or 3 to 4 assets, it's something they probably got to look at, the Canucks have. Is their best deal before this deadline for JT Miller, or is it in the offseason at the draft when he has a year left? Now, speaking about timing, we did have ourselves the word that Jim Rutherford, and I would assume Patrick Allvin, because he is now the Canucks GM, they want offers now. They don't want offers that are trickling in once the trade deadline comes around and teams to go out there and say, okay, fine, here, this is what we'll give you for JT Miller. They don't want that in March. They want things to be done now because they don't want to run out of time, which I very much respect, because as we know, with Jim Benning, that guy ran out of time because he left everything to the last minute. So for Rutherford, Allvin, these guys going out there and saying, yeah, send in your offers now. Like, we don't want to lollygag. We want to go out there and make our decision sooner rather than later. It means a lot. It's a very good thing. And so for Pierre LeBrun to go out there and lay it out on the line, whether or not now or after this season would be the best time to trade a JT Miller, it is an interesting conversation, but just based off of what he says the price could be, that's kind of what I wanted to focus on more instead. 3 to 4 prospects, 3 to 4 assets. Now, I'll say this right here. It's difficult to justify trading any player that is a roster player already for only future, for only guys that are not going to help out your team right away. 3-4 prospects, like, is there even a team in the Rangers or the Bruins or the Flames or the Wild that have 3 to 4 prospects that are good enough that you could combine for a package that could say, okay, this is worth a JT Miller? I'm not too sure. Now, that's not even like draft picks, that's just prospects. So, it's a little difficult to go out there and try to fill in the blanks, but I mean, if there is a team out there that could go out there and get 3 to 4 full-on prospects, then the Canucks do have somewhat of a bare prospect pool. I would not necessarily say no, depending on how good those prospects are. Obviously, you have to know who they are in the first place, because if you're just trading away Miller for a few bums, it's probably not going to work. We also had ourselves Craig Button, who said himself on the same day, if he were the Canucks GM, the only way he is trading Miller is if he gets a top 3 defenseman in return. Not a draft pick, not a prospect, but a top 3D. Now, that is also something the Canucks could definitely use too. How many top 3 defenders do the Vancouver Canucks realistically have on their team? They have Quinn Hughes. He is a top 2 defender probably on most NHL teams. But then who else? Oliver Ekman-Larsson? I mean, he's good, but is he a top 3D? Tyler Myers? Is he a top 3D? Tucker Poolman? I don't know. You could debate OEL, and that's about it, but the Vancouver Canucks do need more quality defensemen. A right side, when everybody's fully healthy, of Poolman, Hamonic, and Myers is just not going to cut it. I'm sorry. You got guys that are on value contracts like Burrows, like Schenn. These guys can come into your lineup, and they can play suitably. They can play well enough, but these guys are cheap. You have the guys like Hamonic and Myers and all that are playing well below their cap hit. And so this is kind of what everybody was talking about when it comes to Jim Rutherford going out there needing to fix this decor. And if you're trading away a JT Miller, Button is like, yeah, I'm only trading him if we get a top 3 defenseman in return. Not a top 4 defenseman, but a top 3. Somebody who could slot in to the top pairing and actually fit in that role. We also had ourselves Dan Kaniewski of Hockey Now going out there saying this: Canucks JT Miller is available, but sources say the price is equal to the Coyotes' asking price for Jakob Chychrun. A team will have to part with a number 1, a blue chipper, former number 1, and a player. Now, a number 1 just by itself, I don't really know what that means. Is that a number 1D? Is that a number 1 forward? A blue chip former number 1? I assume it's a prospect, but either way, if the Coyotes' asking price for Jakob Chychrun is the comparable here for JT Miller, then we could go out there and assume that the price is very, very high. Because there was a lot of rumors going around earlier on in the year that the Chychrun trade price was akin to the Jack Eichel trade price from Buffalo earlier on in the season. So all of a sudden, are we thinking about 4 quality assets, 4 first-round caliber assets, whether that's draft picks or prospects that were taken in the first round that are developing like first-round guys, or roster players on your team who are playing like first-round caliber guys? Jack Eichel went out there and got Tuck, Krebs, and a first. And you gotta remember, Eichel was traded alongside of another draft pick. If the Vancouver Canucks could get a return that is like Tuck, Krebs, and a few picks, honestly, I'd say yeah. I would say yes for JT Miller, because you take a look at what Alex Tuck and Krebs are doing right now. These are the kinds of guys that are doing, well enough to justify a Jack Eichel trade. And we're only using the Eichel comparison because the Chychrun comparison was being linked to the same quality of assets that Eichel is going for, or that he did go for. And so now, to hear that Miller is in that same realm of a Chychrun as well, it does very much intrigue me as to where the Vancouver Canucks would go should they actually trade JT Miller and should they actually get some stuff in return. So talk to me in the comments, what do you think about Pierre LeBrun and his assessment, 3 to 4 prospects for JT Miller, Craig Button and his assessment, nobody else, no prospects, no picks, no nothing, just a top 3D And then Dan Kaniewski of Hockey Now and his assessment, hearing that the price is similar to Jacob Chychrun. Let me know in the comments all your thoughts about Miller and the Canucks and where they should go in a trade-like scenario. Do you want to trade this guy if this is what it's going to cost? I hope you enjoyed this video. I recorded this in one take, so I feel very happy about that. And bye.